of the world's mega-diverse countries, rich in natural resources and biological diversity. The very reason why agriculture, marine and aquatic, and natural resources are foreseen as key sectors in achieving sustainable and inclusive development in the country. With the right policies and programs in place, backed with appropriate technologies and innovations, attaining development is not far from reach. This is where the Philippine Council for Agriculture, Aquatic and Natural Resources Research and Development, or PICARD, takes its ground. PICARD was established in 2011 through the merging of two sectoral councils under the Department of Science and Technology: the Philippine Council for Agriculture, Forestry and Natural Resources Research and Development, and the Philippine Council for Aquatic and Marine Research and Development. Consolidating these two organizations into one apex council broadened its coverage, as well as provided a unified and holistic approach in addressing concerns in the agriculture, aquatic, and natural resources, or AANR sector. The Council aims to provide strategic leadership in promoting science and technology, or S&T, as a platform for AANR products innovation and environmental resiliency. Committed to sustaining dynamic leadership in S&T innovation in the AANR sector, PICARD formulates policies, plans, projects, and strategies for S&T development in the AANR sector. It programs and allocates government and external funds generated for research and development, or R&D efforts, as well as monitors R&D projects. It also generates external funds for R&D activities. PICARD carries out programs and advocacies according to 4 banner programs that embody its S&T interventions in the AANR sector. These are strategic R&D, R&D results utilization, policy research and advocacy, and capability building and R&D governance. The Council builds partnerships with local and international organizations for joint R&D, training, technical assistance, and information and technology exchange. It also ties up with funding institutions to support its programs and advocacies. Through the years, PICARD has been a lead organization in managing the network of government and higher education institutions involved in the AANR sector. Guided by its core values of relevance, excellence, and cooperation, PICARD catalyzes development through advancing S&T in the AANR sector. It is steadfast in its commitment to its mandates for the betterment of the lives of every Filipino, now and in the generations to come.
We are Filipino by design. Our roots have attuned us in promoting agricultural sustainability through sheer Philippine ingenuity. We are driven to progress. Back in 1997, our group of less than 20 staff and field employees had to face financial limitations and market concerns where we had to prioritize funding only in select areas. Armed with only 2 products and constantly anxious over unguaranteed success, we faced industry giants coupled with an unpredictable and overcritical market. This is why reaching 25 years is not. Our founders focus on their dreams to support the Filipino farmer set up his entrepreneurial goals for a sustainable livelihood. Our vision of a developed society is rooted in an agricultural system that thrives amidst calamities and global pandemics. Thus, we collaborate and cooperate with groups that share the same goal. New opportunities excite us. Every day, we discover new opportunities that expand our capacity for growth. In our earlier years, we founded Leeds Environmental Health Products Corporation and Leeds Animal Health Corporation, which are agriculture-related companies that cater to markets beyond rice and vegetable farming. Prime Stocks Chemical Corporation and Golden Prime Stocks Corporation focused on streamlining the production and selling of high-demand products. By our 20th year, we decided to serve different aspects of the farmer's value chain. We started Leeds Tech Corporation for agri-machinery, Leeds Agri-Ventures Corporation for the production of quality seeds, and Leeds International Corporation to address rice consumer demand. The year 2020 saw us reach unprecedented heights when we surpassed 2 billion pesos in sales. This encouraged us to widen our reach and tap into the real estate industry through Malveda Properties and Development Corporation, which is geared towards development programs for smart city living. We take civic duty seriously. We launched Leeds Diagnostics to give back to the communities that have supported us into the company we are today. We are excited to launch our medical missions and outreach programs that will be accessible to even the smallest farming communities anywhere in the country. From a small company initially overlooked by the industry and that barely hits their growth targets, we now have more than 300 employees serving over 1,000 agricultural dealers and distributors, which equip millions of Filipino farmers with the right tools and technology nationwide. With an experienced portfolio that covers multiple industries, we continue to expand the dream started by Filipinos for the Filipinos.
Welcome to the third plenary session of our conference. Magandang hapon po sa lahat. This time, we are going to talk about strategic partnerships for sustainable digital agriculture policies. Okay? Sa hapon na ito, ang mga experts natin will be talking about policy, partnerships, and ano yung mga recent na activities, no, for the modernization of agri-fisheries. As we know, adaptation and use of digital agriculture technologies continuously grow. This is based on Eller's publication in 2021, where he indicated that agricultural policies should support sustainability, for the continuous development and adaptation or growth of digital agriculture. They should cover the mitigation of all undesired impacts of the technology, including the enhancement of its benefits for farming. Digitalization actually affects three dimensions in the policy. No? These are the instrument, the location specificity, and the intertemporal flexibility. We would like to welcome on board our facilitator for this afternoon, Tamari Chapter Secretary and the Director of PSA alias R&D Center, Dr. Norman De Jesus.
Hello, good
Norman,
afternoon, Ma'am
the
Dr.
virtual
J
floor
at
is
Dr.
yours.
Mon. Yeah, magandang hapon po sa ating lahat. Am I loud and clear?
Yes, you're loud and clear, Norman.
Sir Mon, Ma'am J.
Yes.
Can we proceed?
Yes, go ahead. Go ahead, Norman. You have
Yeah,
your...
magandang hapon po sa ating lahat. Good afternoon to everyone. Welcome to the plenary number 3 of the second PAA International Virtual Congress and the 2022 PAA Summit with the theme Strategic Partnership for Sustainable Digital Agriculture Policy. This afternoon, we have 3 distinct guest plenary speakers. Without further ado, the number 1 speaker is a renowned technical reviewer of economics. He had his MA and PhD in economics at the University of the Philippines. He is the former president of the Philippine Institute for Development Studies, among many other achievements. Currently, he is the team leader of the post-pandemic policy on food security, agriculture, and agribusiness of the USAID Respond project. To talk about food security policy, please help me welcome Dr. Gilbert Llanto.
Good afternoon po sa kanila.
Good afternoon, sir.
Maliwanag po ba yung audio?
Yeah, loud and clear.
Okay. Salamat po muna sa una-una sa pag-imbita niyo sa amin dito sa inyong Congress. Malaking opportunity po at saka honor to speak before this distinguished group. So I have a presentation this afternoon. Medyo mahaba. I'll skip probably some of the slides. I have 60 slides here, but I have a time limit. So what I'll do, sir, is to tell whoever's manipulating this PowerPoint presentation to just flip over to the next slide as I proceed. So ganun po siguro. Well, as stated in the introduction, I am a team leader in the Respond, which is a USAID project that focuses on competition policy and regulatory reform. Ito pong post-pandemic policy study is just one of many activities under this big project, and I was assigned to be team leader. So what I will do is present the policy recommendations of my team, composed of several economists and scientists, to your Congress. So we will do this towards the end of the presentation. Meanwhile, here's what I propose to undertake this afternoon. One, a bit backgrounder on Philippine agriculture, economic trends and impact of COVID-19. This is just a refresher because I'm sure during the past 2 days, we have been discussing agriculture and agricultural policies. We are familiar with this, but it's just by way of a refresher, so we will just breeze through this. And then bring you to a short discussion of current government programs and interventions, just to illustrate how the government is responding to the problem of food security, especially in a time of pandemic. And then talk about the policy study that we are undertaking, why we need to do this study, because some people would say we don't need another study. What we need is action. So, but this one will say we need a study because of the following reasons, and we will discuss it. And then I'll go to the policy recommendations. And probably this is where we will spend most of our time. I cannot discuss all the policy recommendations. There are 14 chapters in this big study, And what I asked the different authors is just to send me their most salient recommendations. So I do not propose to discuss everything, but probably will call your attention to a number of these recommendations, which I think are very pertinent to today's discussion. Let me go to the status of Philippine agriculture, uh, and that brings me to this slide, which shows us the structure of the economy, how the structure has performed over time. And what we see immediately here would be the large share of services in the economy, with agriculture showing a declining trend with respect to share to total GDP. This is not surprising because this is what we see in other countries as they move on their respective economic journey. We see a shift from agriculture as being the biggest contributor to GDP, gross domestic product, to manufacturing and industry and services. Except that in the Philippines, we didn't experience the kind of what you call this performance rendered by other countries. Other countries would move from agriculture to manufacturing and then services. In the Philippines, we jump from agriculture to services, and then we have more or less some segment of the economy still dependent on, on manufacturing and industry. There's a big reason behind this. Maybe there's not time to discuss it this afternoon. Suffice it to remember that this is not typical in the growth record of many countries. We jump from agriculture to services. Other countries, most of them, move from agriculture to manufacturing and then to services. To be repetitious, we move from agriculture, bypassing services, move directly to services. The next slide shows us it's not a very nice picture of agriculture sector growth. And what this says is the agri sector has declined since its peak growth, which was experienced in 2016 to 2017. And if still we move this backward, we see a very, what you call this, I would say, not a very remarkable performance of the agriculture sector. There are many reasons behind this. And next slide would tell us, next slide please, that with respect to contribution share of agriculture gross value added to GDP, same story is seen, and we pale in comparison with the other countries. Next slide, please. We now go to the annual growth rates in value of production that will be seen in the next slide. We were dependent on crops, but later on in the succeeding slide, we see that fisheries, meanwhile, and livestock were also big sources of growth for agriculture. But then lately, because of recent events like the pandemic, and right now the rising oil prices, we see a different picture. From being a very big source of growth, I have in mind fisheries and livestock and fishery, we have these sectors also experiencing a decline, most especially livestock, which was severely affected by the African swine fever. Now, TFE trends is interesting. This is a tool used by economists to show how we have made use of sources of growth in agriculture other than capital and labor. So if you net out the impact of or the contribution of labor and capital to total factor productivity, you will be left with the residual, and that residual is technological innovation and efficiency. So what we're saying here is we have not made use, we have not used more very effectively technology and innovations in growing the economy. So a country like Indonesia has better performance when it comes to total factor productivity. We have the labor, we have the capital, but we have to also, of course, use more effectively, more efficiently technology and innovation. That's not our strong suit, it seems to me, based on this data that we just presented. Now, the rest of the, we can flip, what we're saying is just an explanation of the total factor productivity. We have still a lot of people employed in agriculture. And on the average, workers are about one-fourth of the entire, on the average, agriculture workers are about one-fourth of the entire workforce. So what the analysts are saying is this, that we have a labor surplus in agriculture, and that contributes to the low labor productivity in that sector. Although we have also data showing, and we can see this in the next slide, that the labor productivity is also increasing, notwithstanding the constraints, but not as fast as that productivity grows in other countries. Now, we are a net importer of food. So what we're saying is all of this, okay, we look at domestic production, we look at the productivity, we look at the ability of technology and efficiency to increase output. All told, we cannot produce enough to feed the population, and therefore we depend on agricultural trade, and we have become a net importer of food. And this slide shows us the performance over the years. Maybe it's not a nice story to hear, but this is what the data is telling us. So with respect to trade, we import more than we export. And the next slides will show us the source of our food imports. Next slide, please. And you have there, these are the 5 top export commodities. We still export, although not as much as we can probably do had we really grown the economy. Now, let's look at the ASEAN, our agriculture ASEAN trade partner. And the top there is Malaysia. If you go to the next slide, you'll find that our top ASEAN trade partner is Malaysia, followed by Thailand, and then the rest going down to the other ASEAN countries. And we also have our top ASEAN agri-export, tobacco, animal, vegetable products, and preparation of cereals. So what they're saying is here is that Malaysia was the top destination of agricultural exports amongst these countries. Next slide will tell us EU. The EU is the Netherlands. So our exports mostly go to the Netherlands, followed by Spain, Germany. So what we're telling here essentially is that we are an open economy. We do export our our agricultural products to other countries, but we'd also import as well, especially those that we need, and this would be mostly grain imports. Let's go to the next slide. Trade trends. What we want to tell here is that, okay, Philippines do export agriculture products, but take a look at the share of agriculture in total exports in the Philippines compared to the other ASEAN countries. And same story seems to be the same story that we saw before is here. Philippines has not performed quite as strongly as other ASEAN countries. So Indonesia is a big exporter of agriculture products, also Thailand. Indonesia's share is as much as 26% of their total exports. That would be agricultural exports. Well, the Philippines, 10 out of the total exports. Now, you can look at this in 2 ways. One would be to say that, well, we are a laggard and we don't have probably what it takes to grow our exports. But the other way of seeing this is that, well, this represents to us the big potential that we have when it comes to agricultural exports if we do things right. So the 10% there is not something that should discourage us, but I think it's something that should motivate us to exert more effort to grow our agricultural exports. Other countries have done it, and I think Philippines can do no less. So it depends on how you interpret that particular figure. Now, I inserted the supply chain and the logistics just to again remind ourselves that a big explanation for excuse me, a big factor determining the efficiency of trade would be the quality of our supply chain and logistics. If we produce, if we have large produce out there in the interior, which we cannot move to the ports, then that would constrain our export performance, our growth performance even. And the Philippines ranks rather low in this overall uh, logistics performance index. Again, you can take this to mean in a very negative way, or probably this could be taken as a reason to exert more effort so that we perform better in the future and thereby render better economic growth. Next, and this is an illustration of the importance of supply chain and logistics. We can see this by way of an example in the next slide. Why we need to improve supply chain and logistics. In this experience we had during the height of the pandemic, the red dots are supposed to be where the problems are. This would be what the big dot right there in the middle is Metro Manila. What we want to say here is that food and other supplies, other materials cannot move into the urban centers where there is huge demand simply because of the weak logistics system. Not to mention the mobility restrictions and the other restrictions that that went into play at the height of the pandemic. So the weak logistics systems place our agriculture sector at a very competitive disadvantage. Poor transport connectivity, you cannot bring the produce from the food producing areas as efficiently as they should be because of poor transport, and this will have impact on not only on growth but on the incomes, most especially of farmers, and therefore you would have a higher at the end higher poverty incidence and growing inequality simply because the farmers, fisher folk, would not be able to earn the incomes that they need to get themselves out of poverty. Next slide, please. And this is a very interesting slide because this shows us, excuse me, an agribusiness agriculture production chain. And the reason I presented this is just to tell the audience that in these different nodes, input supply, production, processing, agri-industry, wholesale, what you call the distribution. In each of these nodes, there are opportunities to really increase value added. And the way also to increase farm incomes is to make sure that farmers are able to latch on to this production chain. Now, if you connect it to productive or to transport connectivity, you know for a fact, it's very obvious that if transport is a problem, then the input suppliers cannot provide the inputs to producers. So you would have problems of moving farm products out of the farms to the processing facilities in factories, and that would explain why also agriculture has a dismal performance. So we look at agriculture not only in terms of production but in terms of its processing side, and that brings us to the realm of the DTI. So problem here in the Philippines is that when we talk of agriculture and food, it seems to me that all concern is just focused on the Department of Agriculture, the performance, and but there's little thought or little linkages, little thought about linking everything, from the farm side to the consumer side, where in this production chain, there are many agencies that are moving together, supposed to be moving together, performing, coordinating, but at the end of the day, sometimes they perform in silos. So that's the message of this slide. Now, well, just a few slides here showing the impact before I go to the interventions. What COVID has done to the economy, we know this. GDP fell by a big percentage, 4.3% in 2020. And then probably there's hope of recovery, but then there's this lingering presence of the coronavirus, which continues to mutate. So there will be continuing negative impacts on GDP growth and agricultural growth. And next slide says, well, okay, sige po, the next one. same. We have seen, yeah, pandemic. Again, just a graphical way of saying, okay, negative impacts. How do we grow out of this? Next slide. Impact of the pandemic to the agriculture sector. So what we saw here is, okay, when you look at imports, we are import dependent. There's a reduction in imports, and same thing can be thought about, can be said about the exports. We are dependent also on exports to earn our foreign currency, and the pandemic has really constrained both these earning opportunities as well as opportunities to bring in more food to bring down the rate of inflation. So napaka-negative po ng impact ng pandemic. And then that tells us, okay, what do we do in case of future shocks like this? And that's the story that we want to say later when we discuss the post-pandemic policy study. Yung po susunod na slide, it's just about the food insecurity. Hunger stalks the land, hunger rates. The hunger rates have been tracked by social weather stations, and you see here very large spike in hunger rates in 2020. It was the highest in Philippine record. It's mean as 18, almost 19% of respondents in Metro Manila said that they are hungry all the time, and that's not a very good thing to know, because this would have what repercussions. Human capital formation is affected if the poor are malnourished, if children cannot eat the right kind of food, you'll have malnutrition, and you will have what long-term effects on the quality of human capital, and of course later on that would impact economic growth, poverty, quality, and so on and so forth. So kawing-kawing po yun. Kung hindi makakain, kawawa yung mga bata, walang nutrition, the brains will not grow, and you have malnourished people, you have low quality human capital. If you have low quality human capital, then you cannot expect the economy to grow. If the economy cannot grow and does not grow, you have more poverty, so parang vicious cycle. So we have to break that vicious cycle. And I hope the policy recommendations will contribute to breaking that vicious cycle. Next slide po. Another way of explaining what I just said, the food security has risen. Almost half the population exposed to low quality diets. It's not just about eating food, but eating the right kind of food. And what households have done, how they responded to food insecurity, they reduce the quantity of food intake, or do not eat at all, or probably eat only once a day, with adverse impacts on health, nutrition, and ultimately human capital. Now, let's look at government interventions. Next slide, please. Ito po yung, sorry. When it comes to food security index, we always want to compare ourselves with other countries to know how we are doing. Because sometimes our policymakers tell us, okay, we're doing well, we're doing enough. But how well is well? Well, we can say well is well by comparing ourselves to how other countries are scoring with respect to this particular issue of food security. So overall, what this slide shows is that you're better off living in Thailand, Vietnam, or Indonesia rather than the Philippines. Yan po sinasabi nito. Kasi mas food insecure yung mga Pilipino. And the most insecure here would be Malaysia. They have the food that they need. Affordable, available, quality, because food security is defined by FAO in terms of these different criteria. No? Affordability, affordable yung food, available, nandiyan, may supply, affordable, mabibili, quality and safety, nutritious, and then you can sustain it because you have natural resources and resilience. So again, we can take this as a challenge to really try to increase our food security ranking. And the government proposes to do this by the following interventions. Namely, in the next slide, you will find the program interventions designed by the Department of Agriculture, Next slide, please. Government programs and interventions. What we can say here is the department says the right things. Tama po ito. Consolidation, modernization, industrialization, professionalization. These are very good strategies. We need to think about, we need to worry about the fragmented farm sizes, fragmented lands, very tiny farm sizes, and how do you expect to have scale there when you are talking about very small plots of land planted with different types of crops? You don't have the scale to produce the right volume. So now the government is thinking of consolidation. Modernization has been talked about for a long time, and I know that in this conference this has been touched because many scientists have also called the government's attention to the need to modernize agriculture, modernize and introduce, use innovations and technology. If you recall, our discussion of TFP, total factor of productivity, says that, well, a large source of growth would be the technological innovations and efficiencies. And it matters how the managers, how the farm sector, how the business sector, how everybody makes use of innovations and technology to grow whatever they are engaged in. And this tells us, well, we need really to modernize. We need to listen more and more to our scientists and analysts to tell us how should we be doing things. And industrialization, professionalization, I don't have to elaborate this. Obviously, nobody can quarrel with this. Now, the problem is how do we in fact do this on the ground? Yun po ang challenge. Ganda yung mga concepts, but what exactly specific things that we should do? That's a challenge. How to design the intervention in such a way that a particular intervention addresses the objective of modernization or industrialization. Next slide shows the okay, it's just an elaboration of the previous slide. We can go to the next. The NEDA says appropriation. Let's take a look at this. There's something here. Take a look at the appropriation, and what you notice is the money is provided by Congress to the Department of Agriculture by fiscal year 2020. And what do we see here? Large amount of the budget really goes to the rice program. Yung pong vertical bar at the leftmost of this graph. Yung mataas na yun, no? That's the rice program, followed by other activities programs at the extreme right. And then in the middle would be this tiny budget given to the corn program, high value crop program, livestock program, organic agriculture, halal program. So parang isipin natin, okay, hindi naman masama magbigay ng budget sa rice. And we should continue to provide a budget. In fact, Dr. Balisacan, many years ago, there was this book, hindi nyo makita, pero basahin ko ang title, Securing Rice, Reducing Poverty, Challenges and Policy Directions by Balisacan, Leocadio Sebastian, and Associates. Kasama ko doon sa associate. Tagal na sinabi, we can do something about rice, improve the sector. So this is not, this big budget given to rice, it's not something that's bad. Tama naman, nandito naman sa libro, kailangan yung budget. Pero problema dito, you have growth sectors or sources of growth, like high value crops, livestock, competitive tayo sa livestock and poultry. How come you don't find huge allocation for these sectors, subsectors, which are good sources of growth for agriculture? So yun po lang po yung kritiko dito sa budget ng binibigay sa DA. Maybe dapat ayusin to, bigyan ng tamang budget yung mga programs, ibang programs na importante din. Niwala nga dito yung corn. Parang saan ba yun? Baka sa other activities and program. Ang dami, alam natin maraming may hirap din sa coconut sector. Source of growth din yan. Pero politically kasi, the rice sector is the one that gets all the attention, and therefore it is not surprising that the rice program gets the bulk of the budget. What I say is other sectors should also be given due attention. Next slide, okay, says, okay, the NEDA, rice tariffication, which is being discussed now. Should we do this? Should we not have done this? Dapat ba natin ginawa ito because of the current problems with rising food prices because of inflation? So some would say this is not a good thing, not a good law. That equally, sinasabi, maganda ito. Now, what's the verdict? Well, I would say I'll go to what Roel Briones proposes. Kilala niyo si Roel. So discuss na lang po natin ito mamaya sa policy recommendations. Let's go to the DTI. So far, what we are trying to say is that, the government is not remiss in its obligation to really craft out a plan to address agriculture problems and food security. The DA, the NEDA, in this case, the DTI. In this case, DTI has a roadmap and talks about paying attention to processing. So, kita po nyo dito, si DTI, meron siyang phase 2014, 2017, and then a very deliberate phasing in the first phase, in this phase 2014 to 2017. Sabi niya, pay attention to rubber, coconut, mangoes, coffee, cacao, banana, palm. Tama naman. So si DTI, yun ang nakikita niya na gagawin, bigyan ng budget. Pero sa budget ng DA, makita natin wala ito mga ito. Yun ang sinasabi ko po kanina na high-value crops will be a very good source of growth. It will address poverty issues. It will strengthen the economy. And yet, you don't find a budget para negligible if ever you have a negligible budget for these high-value crops. And yet, the other department, DTI, says, well, this is a good source of growth and we will pay attention to processing of these commodities. And that brings us to the second phase. Sabi niya, strengthen agro-processing and linkages. What will you process if you don't grow if you don't have anything grown? Ano yung process natin? Wala. Mag-i-import ba tayo? Di ba ibig sabihin ito? Kasi sa strategy niya, we move to the agro-processing and that's good. You increase value added. By increasing value added, there's higher growth, more employment, and people are richer. The farmers would be better compensated. But what do you use as inputs for this processing? Kung wala nang pinoproduce sa production sector, does it mean we have to import? Pag import, ano mangyari doon sa ating local producers? So what I'm saying is government has the right things to say, but they have to coordinate their efforts and plan. Ano ba talaga? To bear down on production and food security, these agencies have to be in sync, have to synchronize their activities. And that brings me to the post-pandemic pong ating studying papaliwanag. I don't know how much time I have. I'm speaking too much. Moderator, ilang minutes na po pala po sa akin. Am I out of time na?
You still have time.
How much time pa po ako? Marami pa po. 10 minutes.
We still have 10, 15 minutes. We will
Sige.
allot 5 minutes for question and answer.
Sensya po kasi marami po kasi maraming information. Okay, we can skip this one and go to the post-pandemic policy for food security. I have 15 minutes. I'll try to cap this discussion, complete this in 15 minutes. The next slide shows us the framework of the study. This one. Okay, what do we see here? Well, at the left-hand side, you have systemic shocks. This will be your pandemic. A good example, systemic shock. It could be what the writers call now the black swan. We haven't seen a black swan. So when you say it's a black swan, it's totally unexpected. Whoever thought that there will be this pandemic that will shock the system, the second box there, affected system. So this system could be what? The food systems. This could be the trade system. This could be the whatever, the macroeconomy. And then what should we do? Well, we know that these systemic shocks come far in between. We don't know. There could be pandemics there. There could be natural disasters, some black swan event, and this will impact negatively the affected systems. So what we want to do is to have policy and program interventions that will create resilient systems, so that in the event of another pandemic or another shock, we don't know how it's defined, how it will manifest itself. It could be a global war, a global trade war. What we'll have is a system that will be able to withstand all types of shocks. So yun po yung tinutungo nung study. So what we want to find out would be policy measures for structural transformation and modernization. We discussed modernization kanina of the agriculture sector with active participation of agribusiness sectors. What is it? What kind of policies should be put in place so that in the event of another shock or event, our systems, our food systems will not be jeopardized. We will have a very resilient system. We need to be anticipatory. We cannot afford to be reactive. And in the experience of this COVID pandemic, we saw how many governments laid down what seemed to be ad hoc policies. Kasi hindi preparado, hindi ganong naintindihan, hindi ganong na-anticipate yung ganong problema. So nung dumating, nabigla, kung ano na lang ang mga lockdown, hindi naisip may impact sa supply chain. The producers cannot earn money because they cannot bring food to the urban centers. The urban centers are deprived of food. They're rising prices simply because they have the incomes, but they can't buy anything. So because of the community quarantine lockdown, ad hoc, because we were not able to anticipate the problem or the shock. And then what we need is to have sustainable programs beyond the usual emergency relief stimulus package. Kita po natin pag may natural disaster, usong-uso yan, emergency relief stimulus package. What we need would be a system that is resilient, a system that with the policies that can anticipate. Of course, not 100%, it's impossible, but at least to a very large extent, anticipate problems and policymakers and everybody would know what to do. Next, please. So what we did was to put together a study team where we look at agriculture, agribusiness, fisheries, the blue economy, supply chain and logistics, fiscal policy, land policy. So everything that would matter on having food security, sabi namin siguro aralin natin yan. May impact somehow yung community responses. May impact somehow yung trade policy natin, even supply chain and logistics, as explained before, may impact sa food security. Why don't we study all of these different aspects, different issues surrounding food security? Let's have a whole community approach. We look at both private and public. Let's look at collaboration, interagency. Let's ask about national-local collaboration and inter-LGU collaboration. So the approach is systems approach. Now, it's not silo, ODA, itong gagawin mo, ODT, itong gagawin mo, but rather, we say you have to coordinate and really talk to each other so that you have a convergent policies that are consistent and convergent. Next po. So let's look at the proposed policy recommendations. I wouldn't have time to discuss all of this. Let's take a next slide. These are the authors. Let's go to the different policy recommendations. First one would be by Dr. Who's this? Ruel Briones from UP Los Baños. He studied at the UPLB. Now he's a senior fellow of the Philippine Institute for Development Studies. So, sabi ni Ruel, we have to diversify the country's agricultural export basket. Nawala yata yung ating PowerPoint. Trade policy regime should be more open to food imports. Now, that's not everybody will agree with this recommendation of Ruel, that should be more open to food imports. But the reality is we can't really feed the population without resorting to food imports. So probably the issue here would be, one, the timing of the importation. If you bring grain when it's the harvest is coming in, then that's a no-no. You bring grain when there is really very lean season and prices are rising. So maybe that's how we can interpret this recommendation of Rowell. And he's saying here, repeal the QRs by the Agricultural Tariffication Act. He's against all types of quantitative restrictions and replace this with uh, more aggressive tariff reform, meaning, okay, take away the barriers to trade so that food prices will be lowered, food will be more accessible to the population. Now, of course, the other side of this would be, what about the producers? Now, with respect to producers, when you go to the Rice Tariffication Act, it says there that the revenues coming from the tariffication should be used for the affected producers. So yun po yung importante kasi it runs to the billions and billions of pesos, and the law says we have to use this money to modernize, to help our producers. So that's one side of the conversation, which is not actually well explained. Ang tinitingnan lang would be yung impact nga ng imports dun sa producers. Pag bumati nga yung imports, baka maapektuhan yung ability of producers to produce. But the other side of it is that there is revenue which could be used to empower more the local producers. Second, let's look at the other one, yung kay Francis Kimba. This is on trade policy and COVID-19 implications. So he reviewed the terrain, the landscape, and this is what he saw when looking at food imports and food exports. So he says, well, review the scope and application of non-tariff measures in the country, as this may be hampering the flow of food imports. So there are two things here that can impact the flow of food to the country. One would be tariffs, and the other one would be non-tariff measures. We have brought down the tariff levels to relatively low level, but you have non-tariff measures, which Francis says, well, you have to look at this because this also have an impact on our efficiency to bring in food for the population. But at the same time, he says, assess the trade strategy. We have to capitalize on the advantage of ICT, see to it that there is ample buffer stock, and expand social and food safety program. So a trade policy that brings in imports are not inconsistent with expanding social protection and food safety programs for the vulnerable. That's what he is saying. Next, please. The other, land reform and land policies. This is by Attorney Champson. He says, well, farmers have huge indebtedness to land bank. Let's just talk of debt condonation. Sabi niya, hindi rin mapabayaran niya ng mga magsaka given the past experience and what we are seeing now. So he says, we'd rather just condone the debt and start anew. And he says, ease transaction constraints. So he says, well, we need to remove or increase land holding ceiling on agricultural lands. Right now, it's pegged to, what was it? 5 hectares ba? 7 hectares, I cannot recall. Nasabi niya, increase land holding to as much as 24 hectares so that you have economies of scale. Now, what about the farmers who will be affected? Well, what he's saying is if we have a free land market or a freer land market, then farmers will be able to decide really what to do. If they want to move out of agriculture, sell their land, so be it. They want to consolidate, they can form cooperatives, and they can tie up with agribusiness firms to use the consolidated land whose ownership is still retained by those farmers. So what Attorney Champson is saying is that take a look at this issue of land reform and land policies from a different perspective. We cannot just go on with what we inherited from the past, because clearly the result, and this is based on some studies done by him and also by Dr. Fabella, our national scientist, says that it does not really work in favor of the farmers and the poor. What they mean is this agrarian land reform has to be really reviewed. Now, water security, water for food. So this Professor Arlene Inocencio, Dean of the of Economics in De La Salle, is saying, well, there's a heavy bias on constructing new infrastructure, new irrigation systems. And that entails a huge sum of money. Now, she's not against that. What he's saying is that, well, you have to pay attention also to the need to rehabilitate, to maintain in a proper way the existing irrigation systems. because these are investments that have been made long time ago. We have allowed these systems to be improperly maintained, and there would be what, of course, the negative impacts on food security. So rather than thinking of new and bigger irrigation systems, what he's saying is, let's correct the heavy bias on this, and let's pay attention to rehabilitating our systems. At the same time, he says that, well, when we do decide to build new systems, let's climate proof our irrigation systems and infrastructures, and ensure also that the watershed is properly managed, because there will be no water if the watershed is not properly managed. So what we're saying here is what a coordinated approach, excuse me, coordinated policies when it comes to water for food security. And that's the recurring theme of this study. They need to coordinate, they need to ask the other parties what you're doing, and they need to, let's say, work as a team. Now, agribusiness, private sector participation, I will not discuss it because I understand that Professor Divina Gracia is discussing this. Let me go to the next, agricultural finance. Again, this has been a perennial problem, and one solution that we saw would be to ensure that farmers are able to participate in the value chain. So value chain financing could be a key or a strategy to unlock the barriers to finance faced by small farmers and fisherfolk on their own, because there are small farmers stealing a hectare of land. It's so difficult to get financing from a bank. But if the lands they steal are also consolidated with other farmers, there are many ways to do it. They can still retain ownership. They can consolidate by way of cooperation. Then they can participate more properly in the value chain, and therefore get the financing that you need. And there are examples here. We don't have time to discuss those examples of value chain financing. Suffice it to say that this would be probably a better approach to providing finance to small farmers. Second, next please. Ano sunod niya sa agriculture finance? Malapit na tayo. Local governments in strengthening food systems. Our analysts have said, well, the problem is, ano ba role talaga ng local governments sa food systems? So this, our analyst, Dr. Cuenca, says there's a lot that local governments can do. What they can perform is a lead role, a coordinating role, so that all the local players will be working in sync and facilitate access to various inputs for farmers based at their localities. So yun lang. In other words, teamwork between the local government and local producers and local processors. Next is climate change, I believe. Very important. Ito ngayon, pinag-usapan, is climate change real? Well, what we're experiencing now says, well, it's a real problem, and this will have impacts on the food security. So this talks about the need to align policies at the local and national level, and again, the need to coordinate. They cannot afford to have separate strategies. Always work with the local governments. Next would be the environment. Marami po nakilista dito. So sabi ni Professor Florano, there's a Clean Water Act. Let's just strictly implement it. Let's practice smart agriculture. Let's consider relevant principles of risk management strategy for the food supply. In other words, let's conserve also the environment. Hindi naman contradictory yung conserving the environment and having strong food systems. That's what this paper is trying to say. The individual papers can be made available later. Pagka na po na, ini-edit na po namin. I apologize to the authors because I can, for lack of time, and also some of these things are beyond my knowledge, so I cannot do it real justice to the recommendations. Suffice it to say that, well, there are good recommendations, and maybe what we can do later is sit down and scrutinize these recommendations and say whether they are really for the purpose of improving food security. Community resilience. So what this Ateneo professor is saying, Dr. Porio, is that on their own, communities have devised various systems various systems to be resilient, to be more what you call is secure, food secure at their own level. So may mga examples sa paper niya. And what he's saying is we need to maybe tie these things together para hindi individual efforts to, because we see communities when affected on their own, they do something positive, but maybe there would be need for government to coordinate all of these efforts across different municipalities, because some municipalities maybe don't have as strong community resilience innovations as other municipalities, and they can learn from each other, but there would be somebody who would have to orchestrate, coordinate all of these efforts. I think down to the last stretch, CSR. This is gender and social inclusion. Now, CSR, ang ganda po itong paper nito dahil sinasabi niya, okay, these different corporations have different corporate social responsibility. So one big corporation might say, well, we are interested in conserving wildlife. The other one is concerned about food. The other one is... So these private corporations are making all sorts of investments to address particular social problems. No, maybe in the locality where they are situated. The factory is probably located in the upland area. So they're saying, let's have this as a project to address the needs of the local communities. So what the author here is saying is this is an opportunity to really create a link between the corporate sector and the local communities, so that such that the project does not come out as a very small project, but rather part of well-programmed and well-strategized development intervention. Hindi yung kanya-kanya lang, silos. So maybe there's an opportunity. There's an opportunity to really bring in here the private sector, bring to their consciousness the problems of food security, and probably they would adapt as CSR food security and design their projects around that concept. I will end here. Sorry for taking too much time. Thank you po for giving me this opportunity.
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Lianto, for that very insightful presentation by walking us through the problem of Philippine agriculture sector, as well as forwarding some policy recommendation to address those things. Let me read some question from the comment chat box, sir.
Opo.
Let me see. From Jonathan, ang sabi niya, sana talaga mabigyan ng focus ang agriculture. Itong current administration natin ngayon, sana magkaroon ng collaboration lahat ng government agencies, also the private sector to boost our food production to attain food security. Siguro no need to answer that. Ito yung mga question ang babasahin natin.
Dr. Jesus, sabihin ko lang na this study will be presented to the Department of Agriculture. Ito pong result.
It is yet to present, sir.
Ano po yan?
So i-present pa lang, sir.
We will present this to the Department of Agriculture. Certainly, we will tell the DA that this has resonance with people like you. People like yung nagsabi ko niya si Jonathan. Sabi namin na merong comment nga na the Congress, the recently concluded PAA Congress, that indeed some of our recommendations like this collaboration between private and public sector has support. People like this itong grupo ninyo. Pwede po namin i-mention yun.
Yes, sir. Next is from Lilibet. We should not only look at how much is the budget given to agriculture, but also how we spend or manage it. Definitely, correct.
Tama po
Kailangan
yan.
maging diligent tayong lahat na involved sa ground na nag-implement ng mga ah, agriculture programs. Ano po.
Meron pong
Thank
term
you,
ang
Really, sir.
DBM, sinasabi niya, absorptive capacity. So the DBM provides the agency with a budget, and then it monitors how the agency spends the budget. Kung hindi magasto na mabuti at hindi maganda, may problema about absorptive capacity. And following year,
Yes.
they cut down the budget. So what we can do, we can put pressure on the DA. Talagang ito, gamitin natin ito. And a party like the PAA can be a very good advocate for
Correct.
efficient spending in the sector. Kasi alam po ninyo yung saan dapat lalagay pera, paano gagastusin. Salamat po doon sa comment.
The word is diligent use of the budget. Ano? Ito po galing sa Facebook. My observation, we have so many plans, programs, but we lack implementation at the lower level and monitoring how it was implemented. Observation lang ito, sir. What can you say about it?
Tama po.
Of
Magaling
course,
po tayo
tama naman po.
magplano. Magaling po magplano. May nasa implementation.
Yung iba ipo-forward na lang namin sa inyo ng secretariat, ano, yung kung hindi ko
Opo.
nabasa. Ito may very small question ako dito. What are the reason of decline in the Philippine sector? Also the share of agriculture to GDP, sir. A short say something about
It's about the output of the sector. So if the economy is more dependent on the output, or rather the contributor, bigger contribution ng service sector. So kaya po yung sabi natin ngayon, Philippines is really not really an agricultural country based on the contribution to growth of the three big sectors: service, industry and manufacturing, and agriculture. But we're saying it's not to say that agriculture is not important. It's really very important because of the food security aspect. So even if it has a relatively small contribution, that contribution can be made larger if we have the right interventions.
Thank you, sir. Last one. What do you think the specific what is specific government intervention to gain immediate positive result in this regard? If you are to ask,
Marami
among
pong,
the many recommendations.
I think, okay, it's about governance, effective management. Kasi you can put all the money there in the DA, bring all the scientists, but if there's not one who can really make these people work, governance, wala po mangyayari dyan.
Yeah.
It's really about effective leadership.
From Fulbert, good afternoon, Doc Lianto. What can you say about the Masagana 150 of the government po?
Maybe it's unfair to comment yet because we really haven't seen the details of this Masagana 150. Parang what we only know about it is what is released to the press. That this would be what a semblance or probably a pattern after the Masagana 99 of many years ago. What I can tell you is about Masagana 99. Kung yun po yung modelo, ano naman yung Masagana 99? At ang sasabihin ko po yung mga what the analysts and researchers have found about it. No? Una-una, sinasabi nila na, well, it was a good intervention, but yung batang problema at the end, it was abandoned kasi hindi sustainable. Hindi po sustainable.
Yeah. Thank you, Doc.
Galing sa mga nag-aaral po ng Masagana 99.
Yeah.
Pero pwede pong, sabi nga natin, it's about management. Maybe it's about management. Tingnan po natin kung alamin natin ano ba yung components ng Masagana 150. And tayo po mga
I need to answer this, Dr. Lianto, but I would like to read this. Thank you, Dr. Lianto, for these updates and initiatives in helping attaining food security in our country looking forward for more updates for the days to come. That is coming from Jonathan Rabuya.
Thank you
Okay,
po. Yun po
ifo-forward
mga
na lang namin,
graduate
sir,
with
yung mga
progress into
ibang,
a book.
yeah,
Yun, oh, yun.
yung ibang question sa personal uh, messenger mo ng secretariat. At this juncture, we would like to award you the certificate of appreciation, sir. Uh, Let me have the honor to read the citation. Certificate of appreciation is presented to Dr. Gilbert M. Lianto for sharing his expertise and knowledge in his paper entitled Policy Recommendations Post-Pandemic Policy for Food Security, given this 23rd day of July 2022 during the Second International PA Virtual Congress and 2022 Philippine Agriculturist Summit, signed by Chairman Roberto F. Ranyola and President Louis Divina Gracia. Thank you very much, sir. Let's give Dr. Liato round of applause, virtual round of applause. Thank you, sir. Congratulations.
Thank you po. Maraming salamat po.
And now, before moving to the next speaker, let me first call Dr. Uh, Mon. He has some important announcement to give. Dr. Mon? Yes, Dr. Mon. Nakamute ka yata.
Norman, mamaya na lang yung announcement.
Okay.
Before the closing ceremonies, I'll do the
All
announcements.
right.
We can proceed with the second speaker.
Thank you, Dr. Mon. The second speaker is a graduate of UPLB and De La Salle University. She was the former Dean of School of Hospitality Management of the Philippine Women's University, Manila as well, and also Conrado Benitez Institute for Business of Education. She has authored several technical papers and received several awards here and abroad. To speak about private sector partnership on digital agribusiness, here is Dr. Maria Rochelle de Viragracia, an agribusiness expert, post-pandemic policy on food security, agriculture, and agribusiness, USAID Respond Project. Let's give Dr. de Viragracia a warm welcome, please.
Good afternoon. Uh,
Good afternoon, ma'am.
Good afternoon, fellow PA
Yeah,
officers.
you are heard loud and clear, ma'am.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to share with you some information regarding the private sector partnerships or participation in agribusiness. Part of this presentation materials essentially was discussed by Dr. Lianto earlier, being myself part of the team in conducting the post-pandemic study on food security policy. There would be 6 brief topics that I would like to share with you. Introduction about what's happening in agriculture and agribusiness, the challenges in agribusiness and food security, what has been the food security initiatives, specifically during the pandemic or the current pandemic situation, the public-private sector partnerships in agribusiness, and issues to consider in the private sector partnerships. Next slide, please. The International Finance Corporation emphasizes that agribusiness enhances food security by increasing production, reducing losses, and raising income. Currently, the Philippine agribusiness sector includes crop production, animal production, forestry and logging, fishery, agriculture, support services, and manufacturing. Agribusiness in general, next slide please, in general is the chain of industries directly and indirectly involved in production, transformation, and provision. Likewise, food security would involve the physical, social, and economic access to sufficient, safe, and nutritious food that meets their food preferences. And its dimension includes food availability, accessibility, utilization, and stability. Next slide, please. The role and importance of agribusiness in addressing food security would be essentially associated with its objectives. And I would focus on four out of the nine role and importance of agribusiness. First is that the competitive and sustainable private sector led agribusiness sector, and the promotion of commercially oriented agriculture activities, the use of modern technologies, and of course, creation of value addition. Given this importance, we need to understand some indicators or measures of growth in agribusiness activity. Okay lang. Slide number 6, please. Okay. There's some figures in here that are not cannot be shown, but essentially that figure would show that the agriculture, fisheries, and forestry sector contributed about 10% to GDP in the year 2021, while services contributed to 60%. This implies that the country lags in assisting the AFF sector to grow faster. The country has focused more on the services sector, which is about 60% growth in agribusiness activities. Next slide, please. Agri-crops has the highest percentage share to gross value added at 51.4% in the year 2020, followed by fishing and aquaculture at 12.5%, and then livestock at 12.2%. In the year 2021, agri-crops or agricultural crops has the highest productivity at 52.7%, which has grown from 51.4 in 2020. Fishing, aquaculture is at 12.6%, which has also grown for a few um, percentage. However, livestock declined at 10.1% from 12.2% due to the declared African swine fever last year. Next slide, please. Between the year 2020 and 2021, the value added by agricultural crops for the agriculture, fisheries, and forestry sector grew from 1.5% to 2.2%. Similarly, for support services, which is from 5% to 6.6%. Sadly, the economic productivity of livestock decreased further from 6.9% to 17.3%. Fishing and aquaculture recovered slightly from a decrease of 1.3% to a positive 0.2%. Next slide, please. The slow growth rate in the AFF sector in 2021, or a smaller contribution to GDP, as shown in the previous slides, provided employment opportunities through the micro, small, and medium industries. At least 8,000 MSMEs were established at the AFF sector, which created about 1,000 or 102,000 jobs in the year 2020. These establishments still remain vulnerable to external shocks, such as what we are experiencing right now, the input price increases, natural disasters, and forced changes. Next slide, please. Okay. Okay. Despite the fact that there are fewer employment opportunities in the agricultural sector, it is still coupled with the food insecurity situation in the country. As seen in the graph, which was from a study of the Food and Nutrition Research Institute between November and December of 2020, 62.1% of about 5,700 Filipino households that were interviewed experienced a moderate to severe food insecurity amidst the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. FAO, or the Food and Agriculture Organization, characterizes food insecurity as a state where the people lack regular access to enough safe and nutritious food for normal growth and development. The situation, or the results that are shown, results to increase in incidence of nutrition deficiencies and undernutrition, resulting to a weakening of the immune system of the population. Next slide, please. With the identified scenarios that were shown earlier in the previous slides, agribusiness and the food security in the country are faced with the following challenges. Poverty rate. Poverty rate is at 23.7% in the year 2021, which means 23.7% of the population lived below the national poverty line. Second is there is a significant fall in the household earnings. World Bank reported that 41% of the households had decreased or no income compared to the pre-pandemic days. The third is the increasing food prices. The Philippines has an annual inflation rate climbing to 6.1% in June of 2022 from 5.4% in May, pointing to the highest level since October 2018. Fourth is the chronic food insecurity situation in the Philippines. Philippines is ranked 64th in the Global Food Security Index for the year 2021. As earlier presented by Dr. Lianto, the Philippines ranked 73rd in the year 2020 in the Global Food Security Index. We have slightly improved, which was based on affordability, availability, quality and safety, natural resources, and resilience. The country is still very low, or received a very low score in resilience from the year 2020 up to 2021, which means we have poor food consumption quantity and quality and high levels of chronic undernutrition. The fifth challenge is the natural disaster risk and climate change issues. From the ASEAN Food Security Meeting, the Philippines is ranked the ninth riskiest country among disaster prone countries. We are known to have an average of 20 typhoons occurring per year. The sixth is the low farmer share to consumer peso. In 2019, to share, the farmer share to consumer peso, let's say for broiler, is only 46.80 centavos. While for eggs, it's 48.52 centavos. For pork, which is very least, is 34.36%. Next slide, please. The seventh challenge is essentially the low level of capital resources, and this focus on availability of rural infrastructure, such as farm to market roads, irrigation system, post harvest facilities, storage, processing, and marketing facilities. This situation has been occurring for the past 2 decades, and hopefully it will be addressed in the succeeding or the current administration. The next is a slow and inadequate connectivity. The Philippines is ranked 53rd out of 100 countries in the 2022 Inclusive Internet Index developed by the Economist Impact, which is based on availability, affordability, and readiness. Our ranking has improved in relevance because of the gains in e-internet usage and the value of e-finance and e-commerce. However, the Philippines declined in affordability due to increasing postpaid tariff and fixed line monthly broadband cost. The Philippines also had slightly improved in availability because of the mobile phone access that has widened from a year ago. The next challenge would be the movement restrictions on transportation and logistics. With the COVID 19 pandemic, restrictions and availability of transportation and logistics has been hampered. And lastly, you have the political challenges because of the change in administration and, of course, with some modifications or changes in policies that will be implemented. Next slide, please. With these challenges, you can see from the slides some of the food security initiatives that were implemented and still currently being run by different partners to address the food insecurity situation. At the farmers level, DA, through its plant program, addressing the increase in national agri-fishery output. You have the Kadiwa ni Ani at Kita, which is a marketing program, and of course the Rice Resiliency Project to be able to increase the country's rice production. At the processors level, you have stockpiling and source diversification. At the distributors level, you have the cargo lane and the food pass accreditation, which has happened especially during the strict lockdown that occurred in the Philippines. You still have the bulk buying situation for produce from the farmers. At the retailers level, you have the price stabilization measure being instituted or applied by DTI. Consumers level, you have still the social distancing and other health protocols, e-commerce based transaction, and of course urban farming or urban gardening. Next slide, please. With these food initiatives, DTI came up with the 7 M's, which is a way of lifting the small and micro and small and medium scale industries or enterprises. And in each of these M's, partnerships with the private sector or private entities would be important. The private sector includes entities which are producers association, small farmer organization, businesses, and even individual producers, as well as organizations involved in the generation and dissemination of knowledge and technology. The private sector efforts are supported by the public sector in terms of its policies, specifically in infrastructure investments for transportation and community system. In the field of agriculture development, the public and the private sectors or actors use partnership to generate and spread innovations. These innovations would interact with different systems from other sectors. Given this nature, it paves the way for a change in agriculture technology and value chain actors such as the input suppliers, the farmers, the processors, manufacturers, and the broader agri-sector interaction. Likewise, there will be a changing landscape with a mix of players with big data companies, IoT providers, investment traders, startups, and research centers. Next slide, please. This slide essentially identifies some of the public-private partnerships in agribusiness, um, and the different activities undertaken in each of the partnership. The first is the nucleus of change, which has been conducted in the year 2011 and until 2015 to address the small holder coconut farmers, which were being trained so that they would be able to obtain certification for better income. Then you have the Farmers Produce Project. Um, SM would be providing underutilized spaces free of charge where the farmers and cooperatives were able to sell their produce. A group of restaurants called Resto PH essentially committed themselves to be able to buy directly from the farmers. There's also the vegetable derby in Agusan del Norte, wherein the Department of Agriculture, the private sector East West Seeds, Seed Works Philippines, Philippines Caneco Seed Company, and of course Minda were able to come up with their partnerships by providing seeds, um, concerns in irrigation and testing sites, and even logistics. Next slide, please. This is the succeeding slide will also be providing you some of the partnerships. Um, this would be for coffee cultivation program in Malaybalay, Bukidnon. Tesla partnered with Nestle Philippines to upskill the workers so that they would be able to have or produce quality coffee beans that are at par with the standards of Nestle. Then one of the most popular uh, activity or partnership is with the Kapatid Agri-Mentor Me program, which has already graduated about 403 mentees graduates, which even includes 1,600 alumni composed of farmers, youth, and agripreneurs nationwide. This partnership essentially paved the way to the Angat Lahat sa Agribusiness, which is the second phase of this Kapatid Agri Mentor Me program. Next slide, please. This slide essentially compiles some of the smart technologies which has been spearheaded by Picard DOST together with other universities, especially private universities as well as state universities, wherein partnerships have been undertaken to come up with these technologies. You have one which is for the integrated crop forecasting system. Then you have the other one is the mobile near real-time disease surveillance system. You have the open access Android-based mobile app for choosing juveniles of crabs that would be identified based on their genetic marker technology. Then you have the output of mechanization resource mapping, which is important in data collection analysis. Next slide, please. You have the native chicken or the Itik Pinas information system, which will provide accessible information to source out native chicken and their breeds. You have CARE, which is for commercial piggery farms that helps to automate the detection of heat stress and real-time video recording systems. Then you have the genomics program, which essentially focuses on a DNA marker-aided selection technology for commercial hybrid and native pig raisers. And of course, you have the African swine fever biosensor that will help address and monitor the African swine fever that is occurring in the country. Next slide, please. Okay. You have another biosensor for cacao to detect the fungal diseases. You have the GIS-based data management framework to have a cost effective assessment for yield estimation and plant condition data. You have the hydroponics, which is essentially a smart management system that will essentially control, monitor, and automate the provision of correct level and nutrients of the optimized production of lettuce. Now, given those examples of partnerships and smart technologies, there are still issues to be considered in the private sector partnership. The first is the productivity and efficiency. And the arrows that you have seen highlights what would be the major focus where partnerships can be undertaken. In productivity and efficiency, there should be a need for appropriate infrastructure for technology dissemination and intellectual property protection. For the issue of food value chains and business practices, investments in R&D and technology transfer should be focused into. Next slide, please. For sustainability, a need for viable and ready market for farm produce. And lastly, for enabling policies, there should be coordinated actions in support of entrepreneurship and, of course, farming. In conclusion, next slide, please. The private sector partnerships in agribusiness can either be in building road networks or other transportation networks that would connect farmers to urban markets, developing agricultural technologies or innovations tailored to the needs of the small farmers, opening new financial opportunities for business expansion. Second is that the private sector has been found to invest in partnerships in situations where there's a strong pressure to improve the quality of primary agricultural materials. There's a pressure to improve the cost structure of product transformation processes. There's the product that is exportable to high value markets. And lastly, there's a confidence that the public partners will appropriately manage the funds. Third is that collaborative mechanisms between the private and the public sectors share resources, knowledge, and risk to achieve more efficiency in the production and delivery of products and services. And lastly, the contribution of the private sector partnerships to overall investments in research, infrastructure, technology, and innovation increases, provided that the private sector has confidence in the partnership and trust the partners. Okay. Thank you um, for giving me the opportunity to have this presentation.
Thank you very much, Dr. Divina Gracia. Thank you for your expertise and sharing us the result of your paper. Let me read some comments from the chat box. Let me start with okay with I want to know, according to Sydney, I want to know any updates regarding the plans and programs of PBBM. What's this? Yes. If you have some comments with that, is that related to the paper presented? If not, next, I agree with the transportation problem causing the poor distribution of agricultural produce. That's an observation. Maybe if you have some elucidation on that before reading the next observation, Dr.
The
Divina Gracia.
transportation the transportation and logistics problem is always related to the infrastructure, and it has been an ongoing, I would say, challenge of the agriculture and the agribusiness sector. And hopefully the new administration would still be able to um, improve these networks so that our produce would be able to reach not only from the farmers level but also to the urban areas and the different distribution sector or retail sector.
May I know, ma'am, if you have forwarded to the leadership of DA about the recommendation of this paper?
This paper or part of the presentation materials this afternoon is part of the post-pandemic study led by Dr. Lianto. So the details of some of the materials in here would be part of the presentation that will be made to the Department of Agriculture.
Okay. I don't think we are insufficient in terms of agricultural supply. It is the market or the outlet that cut the chain of successful exchange or cycle, according to Sydney. Do you agree with that, ma'am?
Supply. Um, well, I would agree that there is the situation of saying that we are insufficient in agricultural products or supply of agricultural products. It's essentially how we connect or come up with that network from the farmers level to the um, retailers until the consumers. There are several situations or records wherein most of the farm produce are being thrown away because it cannot reach the urban centers or even the distribution center alone. And it's sad to say that the Philippines would be importing some of this farm produce when in fact we have it at the farmers level.
I see. Okay, next from Jonathan. Tanong ko lang, after the abolition of NFA, ano na ang counter nito? Kung na-utilize lang sana ito at na-manage ng mabuti, sana di tayo nagkakaroon ng food insecurity ngayon. Do you agree with that, ma'am?
Um, I don't have any information about the NFA.
Okay. Kahit noong nandyan yan, we still cry insufficient in food, actually, Jonathan. Again, from Jonathan, as observed, napakahirap nagpapautang ka sa small scale farmers kasi di na nagbabayad. Nation nila na ayuda ito ng government. Notion nila na ayuda ito ng government. Better siguro put materials na lang ang dapat ibigay para may monitoring. I think mga materials naman yata like subsidy and fertilizer and seeds, you know. I don't know if yes, I think that they are also giving out cash, pero sabi ni Jonathan, materials na lang sana lahat, wag ng cash. Okay, noted Jonathan. Next. Good. Okay. NFA is not and was never abolished. Opo, nagbago lang yung mandate niya. Okay, shout out sa mga expert, rice expert Sir Joseph Celes and corn expert si Charlie Hill. May bayad yan ha, sisingilin kayo ni Sermon. Ah, ano pa ba? What are the problems, challenges you encouraged or you encountered there before and during your study, and how did you manage it? According from Andrew.
Are you saying about the methodology? Well, in terms of getting information, it was a challenge because you cannot really go face to face. You'd be relying more on online mode of getting information, not only to the people you wanted to talk to, as well as for information you would like to gather and share with the funding agency.
I see. Okay. Next, it could have been better if the CSR aspect of this private institution be delegated to assisting assist supporting the agribusiness groups, especially farmers, co-op, or association, would a national policy can be drafted for this purpose?
Yes, I would agree to your comment. Um, Most of the private companies that are, I would say, in large scale would use their assistance to farmer cooperatives or even individual farmers as part of their CSR activities. There are already a lot of private big group of companies who have been doing that.
Okay. I think we will just forward to you in a private messenger, Dr. Divina Gracia, the rest of the question by the Secretariat. Meantime, we would like to
Okay, thank you.
award you a certificate of appreciation, and the citation reads, can you flash the certificate on the screen, please? Certificate of appreciation is presented to Dr. Maria Rochelle Divina Gracia for sharing her expertise and knowledge in her paper entitled Private Sector Partnership on Digital Agribusiness, given this 23rd of July 2022 during the second International PAA Virtual Congress and 2022 Philippine Agriculturist Summit, signed by the chairman of the board, Dr. Roberto F. Ranyola, and the national president of PAA, Dr. Louis Divina Gracia. Congratulations, ma'am. Let's give Dr. Divina Gracia a warm of applause, virtual warm of applause.
Thank you, Dr. De Jesus, and of course, PAA.
Okay, thank you again, ma'am. Next,
Dr. Norman,
the
before we proceed with the next speaker, we can have a 15 minutes break.
all right, Sermon. The time is 15
2
minutes before
2:45
3
in
o'clock.
our
So
so we'll begin at 3 o'clock, exactly at 3 o'clock,
3 o'clock. All
as
right.
per schedule.
See you there at 3 o'clock.
So for the meantime, let us all watch the videos of our partners. Thank you.
We are Filipino by design. Our roots have attuned us in promoting agricultural sustainability through sheer Philippine ingenuity. We are driven to progress. Back in 1997, our group of less than 20 staff and field employees had to face financial limitations and market concerns where we had to prioritize funding only in select areas. Armed with only 2 products and constantly anxious over unguaranteed success, we faced industry giants coupled with an unpredictable and overcritical market. This is why reaching 25 years is not due to a stroke of luck. Our founders focus on their dreams to support the Filipino farmer set up his entrepreneurial goals for a sustainable livelihood. Our vision of a developed society is rooted in an agricultural system that thrives amidst calamities and global pandemics. Thus, we collaborate and cooperate with groups that share the same goal. New opportunities excite us. Every day, we discover new opportunities that expand our capacity for growth. In our earlier years, we founded Leeds Environmental Health Products Corporation and Leeds Animal Health Corporation, which are agriculture-related companies that cater to markets beyond rice and vegetable farming. Prime Stocks Chemical Corporation and Golden Prime Stocks Corporation focused on streamlining the production and selling of high-demand products. By our 20th year, we decided to serve different aspects of the farmer's value chain. We started Leeds Tech Corporation for agri-machinery, Leeds Agri-Ventures Corporation for the production of quality seeds, and Leeds International Corporation to address rice consumer demand. The year 2020 saw us reach unprecedented heights when we surpassed 2 billion pesos in sales. This encouraged us to widen our reach and tap into the real estate industry through Malveda Properties and Development Corporation, which is geared towards development programs for smart city living. We take civic duty seriously. We launched Leads Diagnostics to give back to the communities that have supported us into the company we are today. We are excited to launch our medical missions and outreach programs that will be accessible to even the smallest farming communities anywhere in the country. From a small company initially overlooked by the industry and that barely hits their growth targets, we now have more than 300 employees serving over 1,000 agricultural dealers and distributors, which equip millions of Filipino farmers with the right tools and technology nationwide. With an experienced portfolio that covers multiple industries, we continue to expand the dream started by Filipinos for the Filipinos.
Sa bawat kwento ng pag-unlad ay may mga institusyong nagsusulong nito. Institusyong nagbabahagi at tumutugon sa mga hamon ng panahon.
PICARD supports S&T Human Resource Development. Nagsusulong ito ng mga programa na naglalayong mapaunlad at mapayaman ang kakayahan ng mga researchers natin sa bansa at mga empleyadong katulad ko for better delivery of S&T products and services.
Sinusuportahan namin ang ating mga dalubhasa na kaisa natin upang umasenso ang ating bansa.
Tumutulong kami na maging makabuluhan ang mga teknolohiya upang magbigay ng karagdagang kabuhayan sa ating mga mamamayan.
Nagbibigay kami ng mga bagong kaalaman na teknolohiya na gagabay sa pagkalinga ng ating kalikasan at magpapaunlad sa kabuhayan ng mga magsasaka at mangingisda.
Isinusulong namin ang paggamit ng agham at teknolohiya bilang pagsagot sa mga hamon ng lipunan.
Kasama ninyo ang DOST PICARD sa pagpapaunlad ng sektor ng agrikultura, akwatika at pangisdaan at likas na yaman. Sa gabay ng agham at teknolohiya, kami ay nakatuon sa pagpapataas ng produksyon ng pagkain, sa pagpapabuti ng kalidad ng pamumuhay lalo sa kanayunan, sa pag-aalaga at pagpapatatag ng ating kalikasan, at sa pagpapalakas ng kapasidad at pamamalakad sa pananaliksik at pag-unlad. Ang DOST PICARD ay nangunguna sa pagbibigay ng kakayanan sa pagsasaka, akwatika at pangisdaan, at panglikas na yaman upang makipagsabayan ng sektor sa pandaigdigang pamantayan.
Narito po ang DOST PICARD upang tulungan ang ating mga magsasaka, mangingisda at ang nasa sektor ng likas na yaman sa pamamagitan ng agham at teknolohiya. Isinasagawa ng DOST PICARD ang aming mga programa sa pamamagitan ng pakikipag-ugnayan sa iba't ibang ahensya ng gobyerno, state universities and colleges at mga international partners. Ito ang DOST PICARD. Kami ang DOST PICARD.
Good afternoon, everybody. We're set to resume the sessions. Just a quick reminder to visit the virtual Congress page. Here it is flashed on the screen. PAAPH.org events 2022-PAA Virtual Congress. We also have a virtual exhibit where you can view the poster papers, and some of the presentations have already been made available to view. Here is the link. Don't worry, we will be posting these links on the Facebook group and on the PAA Facebook page. Please do check paaph.org, our website, for regular updates and news. I turn it over to our hosts.
Okay, good afternoon. We call on again Dr. Norman De Jesus to resume our plenary session 3. Dr.
Thank
Norman?
you, Sermon. Thank you, Sermon. Again, good afternoon to everyone. Welcome to the plenary number 3 of the second PAA International Virtual Congress and 2022 PAA Summit with a theme, Strategic Partnership for Sustainable Digital Agriculture Policies. Early on, we heard Dr. Gilbert Llanto and Ma'am Rochelle Divina Gracia. The third speaker obtained his undergraduate and PhD at UPLB, University of Minnesota, USA, respectively. He received several awards. He is currently the chairman of PAA National Board of Trustees, a professor adjunct of UPLB, a former vice chancellor for administration and finance. It needs no further introduction. No one but the one of the greatest fathers of Philippine agriculture, ladies and gentlemen, to speak about modernizing agri-fisheries through ABCs. Let's welcome Dr. Roberto Ranyola. Sir Bert?
Good afternoon. What I will be discussing is the concept of agribusiness. Next slide. Okay, first slide. Okay, first slide.
Barnes, no.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, good afternoon. What I will be discussing is the concept of agribusiness corridors, which is one of the major planned strategies for the modernization and industrialization of the agriculture sector that is aligned with what is being espoused by our new president. This is part of the National Agricultural Fishery Modernization and Industrialization Plan, or NAFMIP, for the agriculture sector for the period 2011 to 2030, 2021 to 2030. The development of the plan has been spearheaded by the Department of Agriculture. Next. So these are this is the outline of the presentation. It includes the concept of territorial strategies, the ABC, and what I refer to as companion strategies, the success factors and challenges, the current initiatives, DA, related to this, and how we move forward. I've also included some food for thought. Now, So this is the what are the problems then related to the agriculture sector? This would include the lack of access to market, a lack of financing, high cost of logistics, lack of support facilities, lack of market information, limited access to good quality seeds, high cost of inputs, limited economies of scale in production and marketing, and fragmented supply chain, among many different other problems. Now, just to give you next of NAFMIP, these are the new features of the plan, which has been recently uh, developed by the Department of Agriculture in consultation with the different regions in the country. The new features of the NAFMIP include the consolidation for efficiency of the production and post-harvest activities, commodity systems-based production, agricultural innovation system, or the AIS, the inclusive equitable sector growth and transformation, value-adding enterprise development, the modernization of farm and fisher technology, and then combining food security and nutrition security, the strengthening of measures to address the sustainable environmental concerns in commodity systems plans, and coming up with shorter food miles. Now, what is the concept of territorial strategy? The ABC is one of several instruments for what is referred to as territorial strategy for development. It applies a spatial approach to fully realize the potential of a given territory. It maximizes positive interactions among sectors within the territory. Here, territory refers to the socioeconomic group of people, natural resources, institutions, know-how, etc., that are located in a specific geographical space. Now, this is what we, as referred to as the territorial development initiative that is structured along an existing agglomeration of people, economic activities. But this approach, I'd like to mention, no, mali ata yan. Nauna ka na. Pakibalik. Pakibalik. Yan. Okay. Next. Oh, okay. Medyo iba yung nabuksan mo. Okay. So what are the different types of territorial strategies? Iba ang nabuksan. Yan lumang file yan, lumang file yan. To recently. The Agriculture Growth Corridor, it's a territorial development initiative structured along existing linear agglomeration of people and economic activities that develops along a transportation hub. And as I mentioned, this approach is appropriate in those places where there is true economic potential. For example, we're referring to areas where you have a good production of certain commodities and where the demand is untapped. Demand for the market is untapped. Next, please. So here, what I'm showing you is the concept of the growth corridor, which really is an integrated system of roads, rails, and ports that connect regional centers coming from production to business development services and then the market. So basically, what we have is the clustering in the production areas and then linking it to the market, making it efficient with the use of business development services. Next, please. So what are the different types of corridors? This would include, it could be in terms of the feature. It could be through geographical scope, like for example, as an urban-rural corridor, or it could be a sub-national level corridor. But here, what we're talking about here is in terms of the sectoral scope that refers to which is the agricultural growth corridor that refers to the infrastructure and agribusiness development. Next, please. So, what are the characteristics of these corridors? It develops a territory stretching along a transportation hub, which links the hinterland with the intermediate cities. So, the coverage of these corridors would range from a region to a country or a group of countries. And the integrated investments would refer to the infrastructure in logistics. It also can include other instruments like agri-clusters, agri-parks, and also it would refer to it would include the needed political reform and updating of the applicable regulatory framework to improve the sectoral and territorial investment environment, and plus, of course, the institution strengthening through collaboration schemes and capacity building. So here are the possible benefits of agri-fishery corridors that include the fostering of economic growth, the boosting of income for people, boosting of human capital, boosting of investments, and of course, enabling diversification and the promotion of the development of areas and the facilitation of regional integration. Now, these are some examples of the growth corridors. Like, for example, in Asia, we have the Mindanao Development Corridor. We have the Greater Mekong, the BIMP, IAGA. In Africa, we have the SAGCOT initiative. Next, please. Now, what are the objectives? The objective of the AB said then is to modernize the sector and harness the economies of scale. These innovations will support the government's thrust towards sustainability and achieving food security for a country with a growing population. Next, please. So, the ABC serves as the anchor for the interregional and transnational agri-based economic activities. They facilitate interconnectivity through downstream and upstream linkages from village-based activities to large-scale factories, processing, and marketing centers. They help elevate Philippine agriculture and fisheries from resource-dependent to industrialized to inclusive and sustainable agri-industrial development. It provides a means for catalyzing agricultural development, in particular through infrastructure and market linkages involving both public and private investments. It provides a means for identifying constraints and promoting sustainable agricultural development through value chains with agricultural clusters along existing infrastructure corridors. It also facilitates the establishment of multi-sectoral public-private partnerships and providing catalytic financing to attract capital from domestic and international public and private sources. And also, the agricultural growth corridors are essential for sustaining economic growth. Next, please. Now, what are there are 6 defining features of agri business corridors. The first feature points to the value of clusters or hubs, growth poles, and agglomeration externalities that enable small-scale entrepreneurs in agriculture, manufacturing, and services to attain economies of scale in a time of rapid urbanization. Another key feature is investment in infrastructure such as ports and roads that are necessary to be able to link farmers to the markets for their inputs and outputs. It would draw an existing physical infrastructure such as roads and railways, electricity grids, telecommunication systems. A third key feature is public-private partnerships that are aimed at forging greater linkages between modern agribusinesses and smallholder farmers and their communities. By coordinating their efforts, stakeholders can mitigate risk, leverage their contributions, and build on each other's competencies to harness market forces for sustainable growth. A fourth key feature is the value chain and markets for strategic commodities that would increase competitiveness of agriculture at the farm level as well as stimulate the development of agro-processing and agribusiness ventures at the regional level. Another is appropriate rural financing through innovative financing instruments at different stages of the value chain. Appropriate rural financing with the long-term view requires access to longer-term patient capital. Next, please. So as a corridor, it cuts across the entire value chain, from the procurement of inputs, production, processing, packaging, storage, and distribution until it reaches the market. Next, please. Now, there could be different partners in the development of agri-corridors. They could include the government, international financial institutions, bilateral and multilateral development agencies, international companies, domestic value chain actors like individual farmers, input suppliers, aggregators, informal traders, agro-industries, storage providers, transporters, and infrastructure providers. Among the different strategies defined by the Department of Agriculture are companion strategies to the ABC. This could include agri-clusters, agri-parks, technology and innovation, including digital agriculture, farm mechanization and infrastructure investments, climate change adaptation and mitigating measures, and post-harvest processing, logistics, and marketing support. Now, the objective of agri-fishery-based clusters is to consolidate farmers' fishers' produce to increase income. It can be area-based or commodity-based. Next, please. Now, the components of the Bayanihan agri-clusters could include social protection and safety net measures for resource-poor farmers and fishers through the Plant program, like, for example, the cash assistance, subsidized credit, and crop insurance. The agri-clusters is a collective approach in resource management to effectively integrate local and national government support services such as mechanization, free seeds and fertilizers, breeder stocks, market access, and other technical support to enable better farmers or fisher folks' participation in the value chain. One of the major components of ABC is the agri-parks that provides different functions, services from trade, production, processing, R&D, and services. Then we have technology and innovation, including digital agriculture. Digital technology refers to the use of internet, big data, cloud computing, Internet of Things, drones, and sensors and other monitoring solutions to integrate agricultural production from the field to the market. It addresses the need to increase production of food, fodder, secondary products, enhance the quality of produce, production process, growing conditions, and the advantages would be to make intelligent decisions with regards to planting, fertilizing, and harvesting crops, the effective use of information to achieve greater yields and earn higher profits, and enable farmers to access markets, to gather information, and to sell their products. Next, please. Digital agriculture is also a critical enabler for attracting and retaining local populations as well as startups and other businesses. Younger generations are keen to work with technology, and so they could be enthused to live and work in rural communities, considering that recent studies show that in the Philippines, the average age of farmers are nearing 60 as more and more young people abandon farms to seek work elsewhere. The current efforts of the Department of Agriculture related to this are the National Fisheries and Fishers Registry System, whose completion is being accelerated. The upscaling of Ikadiwa that was launched in May 2020, linking farmers, producers to buyers, consumers, including publicly managed electronic marketplaces, tapping service-based models to transport perishable agricultural items. The use of satellite technology to expand crop insurance coverage and estimate crop damages and losses due to natural disturbances, and the PRISM of the Philippine Rice Information System as a tool to effectively uh, manage and monitor uh, uh, rice production. Next, please. Now, to be sustainable, it is important to choose the most appropriate power source for any operation, depending on the work to be done and on who is performing it. The post harvest processing and marketing activities and functions should be more efficient, effective, and environmentally friendly. This way, we can increase land productivity by facilitating timeliness and quality of cultivation, relieve the burden of labor shortages, and enable households to withstand shocks better, decrease environmental footprints of agriculture when combined with adequate conservation agriculture practices, and reduce poverty and achieve food security while improving people's livelihoods. The infrastructure investment is indeed, on the other hand, is to support the agro-industrialization trusts such as farm-to-market roads, irrigation systems, post-harvest processing facilities, storage, tolling, processing and trading posts, fish ports, and cold chains, in partnership with the private sector and concerned agencies and LGUs that should be aligned and planned out according to the impact on supply markets and climate change. The positioning of current and future infrastructure investments must consider supply markets and climate change impacts along the climate change corridors. Next, please. The climate change adaptation mitigation measures. We make use of provincial here, regional climate risk maps, climate vulnerability assessments to adjust planting schedules, deploy climate smart varieties and other management practices. And also, this would require strengthening the operation centers and regional field offices' capacity for disaster risk management and early warning systems at the national and regional levels, respectively. And then we have the post-harvest processing, logistics, and marketing support. We also have the infrastructure investment for post-harvest and processing as a companion strategy that requires a more proactive guidance on production schedules and monitoring of supply from local production. It would require strengthening partnerships with LGUs to institutionalize Kadiwa and Kadiwa to reach out and market farmers and fishers' produce. We need to improve the national agricultural logistics system to speed up and reduce transport and distribution costs from production to consumption areas, including export destinations. And it should be complemented by active engagement with traders for more timely import arrivals and in the strengthening of Bantay Pressure Task Group and in the Anti-Smuggling Task Group. Next, please. So there are four criteria for determining the success of ABCs, namely the social, economic, environmental, and the policy institutions. With the and shown here in the slide are the impacts that need to be assessed for these different types of impact. Next, please. Now, there are a number of challenges in the implementation of ABCs that range from political interference, institutional coordination, infrastructure and logistics, mobilization of private sector participation, and ensuring sustainability. DA has already initiated some projects on ABCs, like in the New Clark City and in Taguig. And the New Clark City is it's composed of 50 hectares, has 50 hectares, and then of course we have the New Clark City National Seed Technology Park, and as shown, the Taguig Agro-Industrial Hub that includes freshwater aquaculture and urban farming. Now, of course, the question is, how do you develop, the agri corridor investment? As shown here, to move forward, the development of ABCs include 4 phases: from corridor identification, feasibility and sustainability determination, implementation, of course, monitoring and evaluation. And then, of course, shown in the slides are the details of each of these different phases in the development of agri corridor development. Now, there was a study that was conducted recently, and they've identified, with the rapid assessment, they have identified to determine the potential of 3 possible ABCs in Camarines Sur, Ilo, and Davao. This can be further explored in detail. In fact, this can be developed as potential agri business corridors. Now, the ABC incorporates all the 18 strategies under the 1DA reform agenda. Now, important here is that, institutional framework is a must for this to succeed. Developing economic corridors involves the execution of concrete strategies and action plans, prioritizing and coordinating the implementation of the necessary infrastructure along the corridor, as well as the coordination of related development initiatives along an economic corridor that becomes more difficult as more areas get involved, as there is a wide range of institutional factors to consider, and an institutional framework that will provide the vital coordination in planning, prioritizing, and developing corridor infrastructure projects among the government agencies should be present to ensure optimum deployment of available resources and harmonization in project commissioning. A central corridor planning and development agency must be duly empowered and tasked with the overall development and management of the corridor and its industrial hubs. And of course, we have the importance, the political will, and private sector support, because a focused vision and sustained political will from leaders is both a public and private concern. These are the keys to achieving the full benefits of the economic corridor. This will ensure proper and timely implementation of planned and recommended programs and projects to improve the efficiency and productivity of the different sectors of the economy. So, what are the some DA reform agendas by central region level sub-outputs indicators? So these are possible strategies. The agribusiness corridor at central level, we have the ABCs, the aqua ABCs with investment plan, and which would be operational. And of course, the Bayanihan Agri Clusters, which with identified production clusters with links to the markets. Next, please. So, some food for thought. These are questions that need to be answered if we are to develop this, ABC. One, where are the potential growth corridors for agriculture and fisheries? Who will identify them? Who will develop the plans for them? These we have discussed in, the regional consultations. Who will initiate the development of agri-fishery business corridors? Would it be the government, international financial institutions, bilateral, multilateral development agencies, public-private partnerships? Who will initiate the development of ABC companion strategies? How will the ABCs be managed? What will be the management structure? What and how will the other government agencies and private groups be involved in the managing of the ABCs? Who will coordinate all the different activities in each identified ABCs? What investments are required for the identified ABCs? Who will fund them, meaning the infrastructure, the logistics, facilities, market, etc.? Who will initiate the organizing of farm clusters and linking to the market? What will be the role of DA, the LGUs, and other potential partners? What DA initiatives would be supportive of ABCs? How will the different DA initiatives support the ABCs? Then, who will initiate and fund the feasibility studies for the development of ABCs? So that ends my presentation, and thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you, Dr. Roberto Ranyola, for that insightful presentation. Now let us move to the comments and question of our audience. Let us read from the chat box. Let me see. Okay, from Maribel. Good afternoon. I believe that all the presentations will be of great help to our agriculture. After this convention, that will be the next step PAA. What will be the next step PAA? Can we formulate a comprehensive proposal and recommendations to the new administration to assist the DA to achieve the food security? This will make our convention more productive. What do you think, Sherbert? Any comment on this?
Yeah, actually, the DA has been asking for suggestions from us. In fact, we are in private, of course, being asked the possibility of getting our suggestions in the running of the the programs of DA right now. The things that have been discussed actually are already have been forwarded and integrated into the plans that I mentioned early on, that the NAFNIP. So these have been forwarded to DA. The question, of course, is how to implement it. I think that will be the question. All of these suggestions are there already. It's a matter of implementing and how they will implement it, because these are what we refer to as directional plans. DA has to come up with the operational plans for this.
Ang sabi ni Marilyn, thank you po sir for that informative presentation. Yes, indeed, very informative. I have a very um, small question, Doc Bert. We've
Yeah.
been talking about modernization since the enactment of APMA. What seems to be the problem? Why we are not so successful in modernizing agriculture? Any thought for thought, Sir Bert?
Actually, supposedly this should have been the guide. The AFMA should have been the guide, but there are other considerations, political considerations. So if you notice, I think you're quite aware also, many of the programs are not really in line with the plans of AFMA. There are so many programs that have been proposed, but how many of them actually have been implemented? That's a question, right? And then also, in terms of the funding, um, the funding has been quite limited also for implementation of these plans and programs. So I heard, I was, information is that, in this private information received, that next next year the president is going to allocate about 170 billion compared to about 70 billion this time. So hopefully that will materialize. But that's the information, private information I gathered.
Yeah, especially so now the president, no less the president, is the head of the Department of Agriculture. Some of the comments in the chat box, Dr. Bert, are all uh, um, are saying they are your former students, etc.
Oh, that's nice. Nice to meet all of you.
Yeah. Allow me to read the next question. I don't know if this is question or observation. What are the usual challenges faced by the ABCs? Because from the time to time, we can still see in the news farmers who are just let their produce rot. Example, tomatoes. Yeah, we see that in the national television. Uh, for lack of market, for lower prices, they cannot even recover the cost of production that they spent. What is your thought on this, Dr. Ben?
That's exactly the point. That's the reason why we introduced the concept of ABC. The problem is that farmers produce commodities that they haven't identified the market yet. In fact, on the side of the producers, they're not organized and they don't know where to sell where the market is for their produce. On the other hand, we have traders that have contacts abroad, needing so many tons of this commodity, and they don't know where to get it. There's no,
Correct.
the difficult is the link between the production and the outlet for this produce. And
Yeah.
also one problem is the problem of logistics, meaning the cost of moving the products from production area to the market is quite high. That's the reason why many of our commodities are not competitive. Our farmers are complaining that the produce they have, the price of the produce they have is quite low. On the other hand, the consumers are complaining that the price of the agricultural products are quite high. So the reason is that's in between. It's the logistics. It's not efficient.
Yeah, very complicated. Ayan, next from the Facebook viewer, thanks Dr. Bert. Isang tanong lang at the rural, let me, the rural farming fishing community, do we consider middlemen part of the different stages of the value chain? If not, what are the safety nets to be employed that their presence will not be affecting the value chain of agri-fishery sector? Dr. Bert?
Well, when we talk of middlemen, what it, well, middlemen are important because they perform certain market functions. You may be able to remove the middleman, but one thing that you cannot remove are the market functions they perform. Now, the problem, however, is that along the in between the production and the consumers, there's so many middlemen performing redundant functions that increases the cost in between. So best way really is to reduce the number of middlemen. I mean, in fact, to remove those middlemen that are performing redundant functions. Now,
Okay.
what are the safety nets to be employed that the president will not affect the? Uh, we have to link directly the producers with the market. That's the best. That's the only way to do it. You have to link them directly. That way, you reduce the number of middlemen that are performing, as I mentioned, the redundant functions.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Dr. Bert. Ang sabi ng Facebook viewer natin, do these programs reflect the present administration's priorities? Bago na naman yung administration.
Actually, it does. Kasi in fact, yung mga nakikita nating sinasabi galing kay President Bongbong, sinasabi niya, emphasis on value chain. The ABC that I presented actually focuses on the value chain, from the production to the market. You have to improve that value chain. And that is the idea behind the so-called corridors, that the gateway uh, of the produce, from production to the market.
Yeah, correct. From Sydney, what is your thought, Dr. Bert, of the advantages and disadvantages of both local agriculture office being in national and being devolved to LGU? Thank you. An old issue.
Oh yeah, it's an old issue. Actually, uh, there's a problem because what I am seeing in the local is that first, in terms of the preparation, the capacity of people at at the local level, no, yung mga tao sa local level. Pangalawa, the second thing also is they've with the Bandanas ruling, they've transferred so much. They've transferred so much of the money from the national to the local, but the amount they've transferred is not sufficient to fund the different the devolved functions. That is the problem being faced right now. Marami nag-aakala, naku, ang daming pera ng mga LGUs. It's not true. Ang nangyari, eto mga meron binigay sa kanilang mga devolved functions, they have to have a position for for mga menro, position for agriculture, etc. But they have to create these positions, for example, but the amount of funding that they got, additional funding, is not sufficient to be able to fund them and the other activities that are mandated by that.
Okay, thank you. This is an observation. No need to answer this. From Grace, the decision lies on those who are involved in the industry. They need tangible support to make significant contribution in the agri sector. Uh, I think agree ka rin dito, no? We have a common
That's true.
Sentiment or observation. Okay, the rest of the comments will be forwarded to you, Dr. Bert, for your clarificatory answer. Will be sent sa messenger mo. Meantime, we will be uh, ano ito?
Meron pa mga
Meron
questions ata eh.
Good afternoon. Why are the entry salary grade of agriculture on both government and private compare with other profession? Hoping to address this. Is this in your lookout, Dr. Bert?
Well, we can do that kasi right now, remember, we're trying to come up with the agriculture's bill, and hopefully, eventually, we should be able to address that. Kasi kung mababa nga mga salary grades, it will not be attractive. But, I think it's important to look into that, no? Kung ano ang mga appropriate salary grades that would attract the people to enter into agriculture.
Especially those licensed agriculturists will be hired in the position that is meant for agriculturists really. Gone are
That
the
is
days
correct.
na kung sino yung malakas kay excuse me, kay Mayor. Anyway, as I've said, Dr. Bert, some of the comments or the question will be sent to you in your messenger by the secretariat. Meantime, we will be awarding you the certificate of appreciation. Let me do the honor of reading the citation. Certificate of Appreciation is presented to Dr. Roberto F. Ranyola Jr. for sharing his expertise and knowledge in his paper entitled Modernizing Agri-Fishery Through ABCs, given this 23rd day of 2022, July 2022, during the second International PAA Virtual Congress and 2022 Philippine Agriculturist Summit. Signed by no less Dr. Ranyola, the board
Ako din.
of chairman of trustees, I mean, and Dr. Louis Divina Gracia, the PA National President. Congratulations, Sir Bert. Thank you very much for
Thank you
sharing
very much,
your time.
Dr. Norman.
Yeah.
Thank you. And nice to meet my students.
Yeah, the majority,
No, that-
if not most of them, majority are claiming they are your former students. Yeah. Thank you very
okay.
much, Dr. Bert. I'd
Okay.
like to uh, give a summary. Um, in summary, we have listened to three relevant topics such as food security policy by Dr. Gilbert Llanto, the first presenter, and he is a private sector partnership on digital agribusiness by Dr. Maria Rochelle Divina Gracia, and modernizing agriculture fishery through ABCs delivered to us by Dr. Roberto Ranyola. I hope you were able to get some insights for us to effectively or become effective agents of change in the field of modern agriculture to our fellow men. Magandang hapon po sa ating lahat. I bring back the floor to Sir Mon and Ma'am Jay.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Norman De Jesus, one of the very active officers of the Tamarin chapter. Thank you for that very smooth conduct of our plenary session 3. And of course, also our thanks to our speakers during this plenary session. Okay, now we are moving forward to the last part of our 2022 Agriculture Summit and the Second International Congress. And before that, some announcements. Hindi hindi talaga po pwedeng hindi ulit-ulitin. Sabi nga ng iba, palaalay gamot sa mga taong nakakalimot at sa taong makukulit. Okay? So again, with regards to the attendance, ito, ipinost na rin ng ating mga staff dito. Attendance submitted or timestamp or logged in before the posting of the link by the moderator are not valid. Ibig sabihin, kung kayo nakakita ng link na nag-post diyan at kayo nag-attendance na, hindi po valid yon. Ang magiging valid lang po ay the attendance that is submitted after the link was posted by the moderator or specifically after our closing message and concluding statement by our chair of the Congress. So maliwanag po 'yon. The evaluation will also be posted right after the uh, the concluding message. And kaya po may oras tayo for virtual egress. Diyan po lahat ipopost ang ating mga kinakailangang pilapan na post. Okay, the other information is yung po mga nagtatanong kung makakakuha po sila ng copy of the presentation of our speakers. Yes, as long as we got the permission of our speakers to share their presentation, you can access that in our website. The link is posted. Yan po, nakapost po yung ating website kung saan nyo pwedeng ma-access yung mga presentation of our speakers. I think most of them are already posted in the website. Partner, any message?
Ayan, thank you. Unmute na ako. This has been a very fruitful 3-day event. Kahit virtual, no, I'm sure marami sa atin yung nagpangipangita at natutuwa na nakita natin yung ating mga
Biglang nawala si partner sa screen.
Dito na lang ako sa tabi ni
Hmm.
Kuya Mon. Okay. Yan. Talagang partner na kami kasi magkatabi na kami talaga physically. Okay. Maraming salamat po sa pag-attend this year. We look forward to another year no, na magkakasama tayo. Baka virtual and face-to-face, hopefully. Let's hope for a better tomorrow. I think, Kuya Mon, kailangan natin i-invite si chair ng ating poster.
Yeah, okay.
Oo, sige, invite natin.
So, let's move on with our concluding session and closing ceremony. And the first part of our program for this
closing na.
the first part of our closing ceremony is the awarding of best poster paper. So yesterday we have a very smooth conduct of the poster presentation where the different uh, authors of the 5 papers presented their researches and was evaluated by 3 judges. And to announce the winner of the best poster paper, may I call on Assistant Professor Jorge Michael Dominguez, the co-chair of the poster paper presentation. Jorge?
Thank you, Sir Mon, for that introduction. So to award the best poster for this year, so the best poster is co-authored by or presented by Miss Melissa P. Montecalvo, entitled Mycosis of Resulting Neonates of the Army Worm Methymna separata Walker, Eggs due to entomatogenic fungi. Congratulations po.
The author of the paper, of the poster paper, Melissa Montecalvo from National Crop Protection Center. I think you will be receiving your award plus a cash. No, may cash ito di ba? And we'll just contact you on how you will receive your cash prize. Okay, again, congratulations. Okay, now moving on, we have the next item in our closing ceremony is the awarding of plaque of recognition and certificate of appreciation to PAA past regional and national president. And I think I will be assisted here by Dax in presenting the award, the plaque of recognition certificate of appreciation to these past presidents who have devoted their life and time for this. Okay. So the first one that we will be awarding, honoring Regional President Ruben P. Hugno with heartfelt appreciation for her loyalty, leadership, and dedicated service to the PAA Mimaropa Region 4B for the period 2017 to June 2022. So in recognition of your leadership as PAM President, this certificate of appreciation and plaque of recognition is given this 21st day of July 20 during the second International PAA Virtual Congress and 2022 Agriculturist Summit. Nandiyan ba si Kuan? Nandiyan ba si Ruben Hugno? Okay. So anyway, thank you very much, Ruben. You were very instrumental in the formation of the PAA Mimaropa Region 4B chapter. Our next awardee is Dr. Marisa N. Estrella, who was the president of PAA Canarium Ovatum Chapter Region 5 for the period 2018 to 2021. So matagal din to, 3 taon din to. Ito yung mga charter president na ito yung mga nagsimula ng chapter. With heartfelt appreciation for your loyalty, leadership, and dedicated service to the PAA Canarium Ovatum Region 5 for the period 2018 to 2021. Thank you po, Ma'am Marisa Estrella. So, nandiyan ba si Ma'am? Ma'am, congratulations po. Yan, nandiyan. Hindi lang natin ma-focus, may flash, no? Okay. The next one is our good friend from Cebu, the first chapter to be established in the Visayas. We honor Regional President Virgilio A. Hacosalem with heartfelt appreciation for your loyalty, leadership, and dedicated service to the PAA Zaya Mays Region 7 for the period 2017 to 2021. So, 4 na taon. Okay, he is the first in the chapter sa Cebu, sa Visayas to establish a chapter of PAA. And yesterday we heard him facilitate our plenary session 2. Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Jack. Thank you very much. The next one is honoring our president. This is our national president for 2 years, Dr. Rosalina M. Lapitan, with heartfelt, ayan, may mga clapping dito. With heartfelt, nandito siya kasi ngayon with heartfelt appreciation for your loyalty, leadership, and dedicated service to the PAA National for the period 2019 to 2020. Okay? So, thank you very much, Ate Baby. Kung tawagin namin siya si Ate Baby, nandito siya. Baka gusto mo punta dito para makita ka. Okay, so thank you very much, Ate Baby. And I think the last one is a posthumous award to the Regional President Honorio M. Soriano Jr. He is the first one to establish a PAA chapter all over the Philippines, Central Luzon. Of course, he was assisted by our recent facilitator Norman De Jesus. Honorable Soriano Jr., with heartfelt appreciation for your loyalty, leadership, and dedicated service to the PAA Tamarind Region 3 for the period 2015 to 2019. So, matagal-tagal din yan, no? 2019. So, and we will be sending this plaque of recognition and certificate of appreciation to probably to care of Dr. Norman De Jesus, or if our JNT Express Courier can send it to heaven, we can also award. Okay. I think that's all that I have for the awarding of plaque of recognition and certificate of appreciation to us past president. Partner, do you have anything?
Yan. Yung susunod natin congratulations again and thank you for all the services that you have rendered, yung mga past presidents. Ang susunod po natin na recognition, ito yung tinatawag nating National President's Award.
Yeah.
This time, we are awarding our National Secretary, Ms. Romalyn Dimpiada, for her dedication and service in serving as chair of the National Membership Committee. She was able to manage the digitization of the membership records and oversaw or still overseeing the information management system transition now towards full automation of our system. This plaque is given on the 21st day of July 2022 during the second International PAA Virtual Congress at the 2022 Agriculturist Summit, also signed by our chair, Dr. Roberto Ranyola Jr., and our national president, Dr. Luina Divina Gracia.
Okay, so talagang small, terrible, and hardworking national secretary. Ganyan talaga kaming mga maliliit. Okay. So next in the program is the Congress declaration and closing message. Okay.
Meron po tayong variation sa ating program. The floor, hindi na to, live to ngayon, ha? So, we have here...
Tatabi muna kami.
Tatabi muna kami, ha? So, Dr. Ranyola, yung naka-orange, and si Dr. Divina Gracia ang naka-award checker, no? Awarding the plaque of appreciation to Dr. Rosalina Lapitan. IRL, sabi nga ng mga bata, in real life.
Oh. Hey.
Okay.
Ayan, next year daw, live na tayo. Sabi ni Dot Bert, ng ating chairman.
Na mga pamasahin nyo, mag-ipon na ng piso araw-araw.
Okay, so as we move on, let's call on our National Vice President and this year's Congress Chair, Dr. Adeflor Garcia, for the Congress Declaration and closing message.
Thank you, Mon and Jessica. And the Chair of the Board of Trustees, Dr. Roberto Ranyola, the President, Dr. Louie Divina Gracia, the officers of the Philippine Association of Agriculturists Incorporated, the regional chapter officers and members, and all agriculturists in this virtual platform, good afternoon. The past 3 days of this virtual conference ushered us to a new milestone in the journey of the Philippine Association of Agriculturists. During the first day, we were introduced to a more efficient and functional interface, the PAA Members Portal, where we can transact with the PAA National Office various concerns from membership, payments, certificate of good standing, certificates, and all at our fingertips. We are also delighted with the accomplishments of the different chapters as reported by the cluster representatives, and we are earnestly hoping for the reorganization of our inactive chapters to have an inclusive growth of all chapters throughout the country. I would like to take this opportunity to congratulate the newly sworn island representatives and chapter presidents. May you be a beacon of hope and inspiration to your constituents and stand for PAA's vision. The recent pandemic has opened the eyes of every Filipino that indeed agriculture is the backbone of the country's economy and survival. Great challenges are on our shoulders as licensed agriculturists and as professional agriculture association. The lectures delivered by our expert resource persons in this conference will capacitate us as we rally behind our leaders in the industry, because it is now more than ever that we need to work hand in hand to be able to avert the impending food shortage and the ever rising prices of commodities, while the farm gate price of our farmers' produce remain at its lowest. We also would like to solicit your unstinted support for the passing and approval of the Philippine Agriculturist Bill to standardize the operations of the agriculture sector and most especially for the standardization of the salary grades of our IEWs to be at par with their counterparts in the health and education sectors. Let us continue to support the advocacies of PAA Incorporated. We are overwhelmed with the outpouring support of our members throughout the country. Thank you for heeding our call for this virtual conference. We look forward to meet you face to face during our next conference. Mabuhay ang mga agriculturists and mabuhay PAA Incorporated. But before I end the message, allow me to thank the dedicated men and women who are behind the cameras, behind the scenes, for ensuring the success of this virtual conference. Thank you very much. And mabuhay tayong lahat. Let us all stay safe. Thank you very much.
Okay. Am I in? The host is muted. Okay. Okay. So again, we would like to thank our partners who supported the conduct of our Second International Congress and 2022 Philippine Agriculture Summit, Picard, Leads Agri, Sherka, Nature Tech, and PIPRA. And also, we would like to thank, kahit sinabi na ni Ma'am Adiflor, the people behind, I'd like to mention them one by one. We would like to thank Mr. Dakila, si Dax, for who is managing our StreamYard and all our and all the platforms, and he is being assisted in the site by in the office by Mr. Justin Inferno. Justin, thank you very much. And then of course si Jim Cano, who developed our 360 virtual exhibit. Napakaganda. Bisitahin niyo po yung ating virtual exhibit, yung kanyang dinevelop na virtual exhibit. Yan po, nakapost uli yung virtual exhibit. Ang ganda po ng pagkakagawa ni Jim. Si Jim po ay member ng board. And then of course, the staff behind this, Tessa. Where's Tessa? Yan. And then we have Denise is monitoring the Facebook, and Maya. And of course, the person behind the program who really did a lot of work to ensure this program is working smoothly. The co-chair of this Congress, Miss Weng Castillo. Nandito po kaming lahat sa office. And now, I think that concludes our second International Congress and 2022 Agricultural Summit. Thank you all for your participation, and now we would like to request Dax to post the attendance link and the day 3 evaluation. So starting po this time, 5:08 ang validity ng attendance ng ating mga participants. Okay, with that, thank you very much, and we'll have this posted siguro Dax siguro hanggang 4:30 i-post natin para yung iba makuha pa yung kan. Okay, thank you very much everyone, and see you next year face to face for our third International Congress and 2023 Philippine Agriculturist Summit. Bye-bye. Partner.
Magkita tayong lahat. Kailangan magpa-picture. Sige. Mag-ingat po tayo. See you soon sa regional conferences, regional international conference ng Region 5, Region 11, tsaka Region 7.
And then of course, yung mga chapter na magre-reorganize, we are willing to assist you. Just give us advance notice para maayos din namin ang aming schedule. Okay, see you all.